Hello, my name is J. Joseph Aguilera, and today I'm going to be reviewing the film version of Macbeth, directed by the infamous Hollywood director and noted fugitive from justice, Roman Polanski. Because this is an adaptation of a play, most of what I will discuss will be in relation to Shakespeare's original text, but I would like to take a brief moment to talk about the film by itself. There are some absolutely beautiful shots in this film. Much of how this film is shot gives it a dark, grimy, and dirty feel, which is very fitting for the time period and subject matter, as well as Polanski's directing style. Samuel Crowell described Polanski's movies as commonly relying on melodramatic, gothic sensationalism. Given that the only two Polanski movies I've watched are Macbeth and The Ninth Gate, I'm inclined to agree. The soundtrack, in my opinion, is 10 out of 10 gnarly and some of the most unsettling background music I have ever heard in any film. This is a common tactic in Shakespeare movie adaptations to turn up the creepy factor to 10, making parts of the film almost horror-like. It is a welcome fit and a nice addition because this is simply something that can't be done as effectively on stage. I wish I could play some of the music, but I won't because of YouTube's DMCA practices. Also, the combat in this film is quite possibly some of the most difficult I have seen in any film, with long scenes of taxing and complicated movements for the actors to perform. Although this is adopted from Shakespeare's original script, there is clearly some instances of deviations from the original source material and specific choices that were clearly inspired by the play but not actually in the play. These choices made by Polanski and the co-writer of the screenplay and literary advisor Kenneth Tian. Tian is not often talked about when discussing this movie, but I would be remiss if I didn't mention his theatrical knowledge and position as one of the greatest 20th century theater critics. The vast majority of dialogue in this film is ripped straight from the play, and many of the soliloquies and asides where characters are speaking briefly to themselves are instead not spoken out loud, but narrated by the actors as non-diegetic sound. This is very common in Shakespeare film adaptations and isn't a problem at all. The important part is that the tone and overall meaning of the lines is still there despite these changes and omissions. The scene selection list also seems to be exactly the same as the play, obviously excluding scenes like the murder of Banquo that don't actually happen in the play but instead are assumed to happen offstage. One notable aspect of the play that the film did very well was showing the character arcs and loss of sanity in both Macbeth and Lady Macbeth. Macbeth himself in this movie is exactly what I would expect from a live-action Macbeth. The actor does an amazing job of blending a thirst for power with a terrible conscience, which is the heart of the character Macbeth. The CGI and editing magic done to display Macbeth's turn towards insanity, like that of the dagger and Banquo's ghostly corpse showing up to dinner, are likely far better than what could be done on stage. The film also does a fantastic job of showing the relationship between Macbeth and Lady Macbeth. Aside from their scheming and plotting, she is seen multiple times caressing and comforting Macbeth each time he loses his mind, trying to gather him for the good of the castle. This is very apparent in both the movie and the play. Now, as for Lady Macbeth, she was by no means innocent in the play, and in fact played a very active role in the murders that we see. But in the film, she seems to take on an even more lead role in the murders, as the film insinuates that it was all her idea, getting Macbeth to murder the king for power. This gives her famous "unsex me" speech even more weight, as she is now trying harder to prove that she is able to be just as treasonous as any man. As far as the film is concerned, her turn towards insanity is rather fast and sharp, but that is consistent with the play. The film also does an excellent job of perpetuating the idea that the Macbeths aren't sleeping, and that is contributing to their declining mental states. Also, Lady Macbeth's famous scene, "Out damn spot," in the film is done quite well, showing the mental degeneration of Lady Macbeth and how she was not able to live with the weight of her decisions. In this scene, The doctor and a maid are spying on Lady Macbeth as she rambles on, sleepwalking with her eyes open but her senses missing. The film does an excellent job of interpreting this for us to see. And the doctor even goes up to her, waving his hand in front of her face, trying to get her attention with no luck. This simple gesture by the doctor adds much to the declining state of Lady Macbeth's mind. Most Macbeth adaptations nail this scene, and this film is no different. Lastly, in the play, the death of Lady Macbeth is not explained thoroughly, but in the film we get a more complete end for her character. Despite the fact that a woman is yelling over her corpse, "Murder," Lady Macbeth killed herself by jumping off of a building as her insanity and the weight of her decisions was too much to bear. This gives a far better and more cathartic end to her character than the play does. This is because of the fact that the film canonizes her suicide rather than the play's approach, which is rather ambiguous. One aspect of the film that is very well done, but not very accurate to the play, is Roman Polanski's Weird Sisters. In fact, they aren't even referred to as the Weird Sisters, but instead as the Weird Women. The play makes them seem very supernatural and magical in nature, but the movie depicts them as more spiritual, almost a difference between magic-wielding witches and what we would associate with American or Western witches, those making potions, saying riddles, and dancing naked in the forest to cast their spells. Furthermore, the very last scene of this film is not at all similar to the last scene of the play. Whereas the play ends with Macbeth's death and a small feeling that the wicked and treasonous pay for their transgressions, Macduff and Malcolm having made the world better, the film goes on to show a quite darker end. The film ends with Donabane heading to see the Weird Sisters, very similar to how Macbeth first met the Weird Sisters and the prophecy that they gave him. This leaves the audience not with the feeling of a just punishment like the play, but instead of the feeling of the instability of power and the inescapable fact that men, even women, will go to treasonous lengths to obtain power. Despite the fact that the ending of the film is distinctly different from the ending of the play, I do believe that it fits very well into the narrative of the film. Overall, to put it lightly, this film is really good and also kind of weird with all the unwarranted gore and nudity that Polanski decided to throw in. As it stands as an adaptation, I'm not sure if it should be considered amongst the greatest, but I do believe that it should be considered the gold standard for future adaptations. If an adaptation of Macbeth, or any Shakespeare tragedy, does not stand up to the quality and fidelity of this adaptation, then that film should be, at best, below average. Overall, I give the film 7 stars out of 10 stars. Thank you.